Also, okay, so I decided this is what this is. It's not an attack on breaking points. This is an attack on Crystal Ball in particular. I don't even want to say that we're attacking her. We're coming to Crystal Ball. We're attacking her. That's what it is. Because she also made some comments last week about like how she favors, leading up to this, favoring Joe Biden's economics.
Indeed.
And that's one of the things that she prefers
over good for the country.
over Donald Trump. And so I have two other clips that we can find if we want, where she talked about that, and then Jimmy Dore did that whole break. Crystal Ball owns Crystal Ball, where they talk about that as well. So there's three different clips that if we need to, we can go at. But she has. Let's just start here. She made the argument 2 times in the week or 2 prior to this that one of the things that she preferred about Joe Biden over Donald Trump was his economic plan, was the way that he had affected the economy. If you are speaking from a working class perspective, right? Because I think that's really the important part of this.
That's where I'm coming from.
And that's who they claim to be. That's who the show is for, right? They don't claim to be of that. They're never like, we are working class people. They seem to be pretty honest about how affluent they are because they talk about the shit that they do. They travel the time. They do whatever, right?
$40 million or something.
They don't ever say we have a ton of money, but they also don't ever say we are working class. They're, you know, they don't represent. I'm trying to be clear about that because they don't represent themselves that way.
Yeah. No, they're a part of the political class.
Right. But the way that they deliver this, and they do say this, is supposed to be for the working class people. This is for the everyday person to be able to consume this content and understand what's going on in politics, from their honest, objective view, blah, 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 right? As untrue as all of that is, that's what
their stance.
That's what their stance is. And so for Crystal Ball to tell anybody that Joe Biden has a better economic plan or has done better for the country economically than Donald Trump did, that is a lie. That's not true, and there isn't a way to make that true from a working class perspective.
Not even a little.
So it's odd and difficult to understand that when she makes that argument twice, that Joe Biden is better economically, when there is no argument. Even if you take COVID out of that as much as you can, right? There are many other things going on in the country that have affected the inflation rate as far as the dollar goes, gas prices, the food prices, outside of the things that happened during COVID, right? We are not, and there isn't a way to make the argument that anybody in the working class is in a better position financially now than we were when Donald Trump was president.
Check.
That's not true.
No.
And they also tend to hold up this idea that, I guess, depending on who you work for and how good your boss is, that the Donald Trump tax cuts only benefited the rich and they only benefited big companies. And if you were working class and you had a regular job, then you didn't make any money from that and it didn't benefit you at all. That wasn't my experience. And so I've always had to disagree with them on that because, and we've also had to be open about it. We work for a very good company and so our bosses are very good, but they were also open with us that when they were doing better because of the Donald Trump tax cuts, they passed that down to us.
Yes.
So I don't agree with that. And I don't think that I'm the only person in the country who had that experience, that their bosses made more money, so they gave them more money. There are a lot of people that did that. And throughout the Donald Trump presidency, I don't even want to go too far into it because that's like a statistics and charts and stuff like that I don't even prepare. But like wages, people were making more money during that time. This is an unarguable fact.
As they said, the greatest numbers we've seen of our lifetime or something like that.
Yes. And then Jimmy Dore started to make some comments about her net worth, right? And there were other people in our YouTube comments that were making some of those comments as well. And I don't know, you researched it, you looked up the numbers that.
Yeah,
I don't.
Well, it's tough because,
and I don't want to.
The net worth thing is always very difficult for anybody to actually get an actual look at. There's a few websites that try to do their best, and they'll try to say this, that, and the other thing. Some people are saying she's worth $4 million. Some people said essentially her entire net worth, because she has $23 million in investments, apparently.
Right.
Who knows? But she's also been married like a number of times to very like well-off people.
Yeah. And
so who knows where that kind of stuff comes from? It could. Who really knows?
Yes. Joseph says they obviously don't buy gas. She did say last week that she has a Ford EV that she drives like to work, and then they have a gas vehicle for longer road trips that they do.
A Ford EV, huh? Don't want to don't want to support Elon Musk apparently and get the good EV.
No, gotta get the Ford EV.
Can't be doing that.
I don't know. I don't know that much about electric vehicles.
I knew I do know my buddy just paid off his Tesla, and he's very thrilled about that.
Yeah, I know more about the political side of electric vehicles than I do about the actual ownership side of electric vehicles. I don't know that much about it. So the reason that we provide this detail is because it is in this segment that she gives an argument for Bidenomics, attempts to give an argument for Bidenomics that is not very good.
And then immediately steps on her argument too, by the way.
Yes. So we will kind of address the different points that she brings up as far as the way that
Kevin's here.
Kevin.
Shout out, buddy.
Yes. Money went further under Donald Trump.
Oh, for sure.
You are correct. Yes. There's no doubt about that.
That's what happens when inflation kicks in hardcore.
Yes. That doesn't, I want to say this really quick because I want to make sure that we're fair about it. That doesn't remove the financial irresponsibility from both presidents, because there was, in fact, enormous amounts of spending under both administrations.
Yes.
That did get us to where we're at now. And that's why I tried to remove that COVID thing, because they both had a hand in what was going on there.
Yeah.
And it's obviously just gotten worse since then. But
it has. Yeah. And I think in DJ Trump's kind of defense, at that particular point when they're talking about, you know, the first original like printing of the money, you know, that massive $1 trillion, you know, multi-trillion-dollar package, all that stuff. Congress is going to push that through with or without him. We'll put it that way.
Yes.
So he was, mind you, he did kind of take the helm on it. Was definitely advocating for it.
Right.
But there is an argument to be had there. So just to be equal,
totally
on both sides there.
Totally. And what I mean, like you said, what are you going to do when the bills get to your desk? You're going to just not sign them?
Yeah.
You're going to, sorry guys, I'm
Veto.
I'm not going to send out the checks. You know what I'm saying?
And then piss off the, what are you going to do, bro? They kind of,
precisely,
they tie your hands.
Because then at the end, towards the end of during the election, he's like, send out more checks. He's like, fuck it. I
Let's
don't
go.
get it. Send them again.
Love it. All right, let's kick it.
The Fed letting any bank print money in March of 2020 didn't help inflation. You're correct about that.
Oh yeah.
Yes,
It
and
literally just hurt.
Yeah, let's listen to our Bidenomics thing, and then we'll get there.
All right, let's do it.
Because I'm sure she'll address every point that we're
probably
going to bring.
She hits them pretty quick.
Yeah.
Well, a new poll from the Wall Street Journal underscores how even the mainstream press can no longer deny that Biden's age is a significant and legitimate issue for voters. 3/4 of American voters believe he is too old, and that includes a large majority of Democrats. And as we discussed on Tuesday, according to life expectancy charts for white men, there is quite a significant chance that he could actually die in office. As I said, that's worth considering. But
remember, my standing bet still holds. He's not going to make it till the end of the actual term.
Yeah, we got to talk about the Deadpool at the end of this.
Yeah.
Truth is, Biden's age isn't actually his biggest liability. Now, as always, it's the economy, stupid. It's the future promise of Bidenomics versus a current reality of struggle. And if he loses to Trump, it will have more to do with the proverbial kitchen table than with the actuarial tables. So let's dig into the actual Biden economic record, the failures, the wins, and why Americans are not feeling the Bidenomics
Can we
love.
pause it for a second? And can I just want to say why this argument of this is good long term doesn't matter, right? Partially because we're living in right now.
Yes.
And it matters what my money is worth right now. And if your economic plans are not helping me out, but they're going to help me supposedly in 20 years, I don't give a shit.
No, I'm not going to make it that far.
The other reason that doesn't matter is because when a new president comes into office, you cannot guarantee what happens.
No.
So your promises for even 4 years from now mean nothing to me.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that matters for what you're doing is what you're doing during your presidency, your administration, because anything past that can be struck right the fuck down by any Congress, any president that comes afterwards.
Yeah, and that's a very common tactic, especially for Congress, is to make, particularly with economic plans, anything that has to do with taking in money and spending money, they're always 8 to 10 year plans.
Over the next 10 years.
Yes, and that's, okay, that's so we're going to spend, that justifies the spending of the money now, and then once in 8 to 10 years, there will be a different party in power, generally speaking, and they'll roll all that shit back, and then nothing ever matters anyways.
The only thing that works for is infrastructure. But as far as the economic aspect of presidential plans, things that happen past your administrative term do not matter.
And let's be real here. Presidents shouldn't have economic plans.
No.
It's out of their purview. But hey, we live in reality, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. COVID should be left on the people to deal with.
Like the common cold, flu, and stomach bugs, we should have been able to help to decide on mass shopping in person and so forth. I absolutely agree.
Amen.
We were in a hotbed in Washington State for lack of choice during COVID-19. They were at some of the height of surveillance. They were tracking people's GPS on the roads and stuff to see who was driving and who was staying at home. Even though they were saying it's not illegal to drive, it's not, you know, it's not against the rules to drive and to be out. Yes, but there's still a lot of people traveling, which indicates that people aren't staying home and being safe.
They're being bad.
And so we got to lock down more.
Shut it down.
It was really bad here. So I absolutely agree with you. As far as the choice aspect of it, yeah.
Oh, but hey, you know, people should be free to make whatever kind of medical decisions they want to.
Yeah.
As long as it pertains to just abortion or with gender affirmation care. Nothing else, though. Not if we tell you need to get a jab.
The TLDR is this. The economic story of the Biden administration, as experienced by regular people, has been price spikes coupled with a stripping away of all the pandemic programs, which actually did help them survive.
So, Donovan, this has been, you know, this is one of my biggest points of contention throughout this whole thing.
Yes.
And she introduces it right here. Part of the major issue with this is the stripping back or stripping of those COVID pandemic era related programs that were enacted. Why were these things rolled back, Donovan? Because the COVID emergency that gave them legal justification to do those things ended? So with that, you have to pull back those programs?
Right.
Okay. Just sanity check for me real quick.
It wouldn't have mattered who the president was that those programs were being rolled back.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have mattered.
It was going to end with the pandemic.
Yes.
Done.
This chart here from the lever shows all of the pandemic social safety net and how piece by piece it was allowed to expire, massively shrinking the social safety.
It was allowed to expire, bro.
And she does this a lot with, and I guess I can't hit her too much on it because if you ask her, she will say like nationalize it, you know. But all of this undercoded language of like we should have just continued these programs for the rest of forever. So once we put them in place, we should never have done away with them. Well,
they helped people, and I think she does herself a disservice here because her true argument is that we should have just turned those into regular programs.
Yeah.
But she doesn't do a very good job explaining that. But if we watch her 100%, she wants those things to be totally ensconced in law. And she's upset that they didn't. And that would be my best, most charitable interpretation of what she's trying to say, even though the way she's actually saying it is just saying, you know, because they just rolled back the COVID era policies. Garbage.
Net for ordinary Americans. Now, for many people, these programs instituted by both Trump and Biden actually really improved their financial situation during the COVID crisis.
Okay, also, I knew we were going to do this. Some of the stuff was like unemployment insurance, was an increased payment on your unemployment insurance. Why would you get more unemployment? The point was that we're taking all these jobs away as the government. We're limiting what you can do as far as your employment. People are going to lose their jobs, like you can't go out to eat, so people are going to lose their jobs. When the economy is open now, we don't need to be giving you an extra $600 a month on unemployment. When we told you in the beginning, we're just throwing out this number because it's a highball average of what people should be getting. And if people get too much, it is what it is.
Well, and then
why would we continue that? Why?
Exactly.
There are arguments for some of these things, right? Why would we continue the unemployment insurance increase? For what reason? When you should be getting a fucking job again. Every business nearly has a sign out front that says that they are hiring.
Yep.
Why would we continue to pay you more to not have a fucking job?
I literally can't think of one possible excuse.
When we're
even from a leftist.
When we're also arguing that we need to continue to raise the minimum wage, these things just need to keep competing. That your minimum wage needs to be high enough that you need to be incentivized to not live on unemployment. Is that what the argument is here?
Yeah.
That's how we need to keep pushing it. You need to make sure that everyone's making over $1,000 a week, because if you make minimum wage plus $600, like that's what a ton of people were getting. You know, it took me a long time to make $1,000 a week from working, a long time,
and you're putting in a lot of hours to get that.
I just don't understand the basis for the argument, you know,
other than just people. I mean, you'd have to make a real circuitous bullshit leftist thing just about living wage type stuff.
Yeah,
you're like, well, whatever way they can get more money, then that's just the way that should be. And I would imagine they would have an argument about how unemployment insurance isn't enough as it is anyways,
Right.
because you still can't live off of that, so you need to increase that and keep the increase. But as we'll get on, as we'll talk about like job numbers and, you know, unemployment rate and all this stuff, and there'll be more to address kind of towards that once we get to that era. You paused at the perfect spot. She got that Mitch McConnell face.
Take a look at this chart of credit card debt. Pandemic programs led to a historic reduction in personal debt during 2020 and 2021.
Shout out.
But as those programs have been stripped away and inflation started to bite and the Fed hiked interest rates, Americans were quickly forced to rack back up new record levels of credit card debt, which has now surpassed pre-pandemic levels.
She doesn't mention it. It's like tricky. It's very good.
Very tricky.
Very, very good that it's only the pandemic programs that helped lower it. But then it's the taking away of those and the inflation and the this that made it go up. But those things aren't what also made it low,
No.
right? Those aren't the things that are fucking us the worst. It's the taking away of the pandemic programs. That's what's really fucking us. That's why we had to use our credit cards again.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the national average of every single consumable good out there being exponentially higher than it was before all this shit went down.
Plus rent, plus power bills, gas bills, anything that could run off of shit that doesn't come from here and costs more money.
And we've talked about it multiple times, but it is worth saying again that when you look at the price of diesel, everything as the price of diesel fuel goes up, so does the price of everything else.
Yeah.
Anything that gets shipped on a boat, shipped through a truck, even on the fucking rail system, that's all some derivative of diesel fuel. And when it's fucking $6 a gallon at your local gas station, of course, your groceries are going to be more expensive. Everything's going to be more expensive because it all has to move. And if diesel's $2.50, you can haul things for much cheaper.
Right.
And then on the back end, the consumer pays less too. So solid baseline for everything. The price of diesel, watch that. As you watch that go higher and higher and higher, all goods will get higher and higher and higher. It's really, really simple to understand.
Now, the original idea of the Biden administration was to permanently expand the social safety net to bring it more in line with its other developed world peers. That was the basic concept of, quote, Build Back Better, to couple long-term investments in a green transition industrial policy with tangible, immediate benefits for Americans, things like affordable childcare, permanent child tax credit, huge investments in affordable housing, and a large expansion of healthcare. But this
What is affordable housing? What's a real life version of affordable housing brought to you by the U.S. federal government? In your mind, what do you think of?
Affordable is going to be dictated by, like, depending on what your job is. You know, affordable to me is not the same thing as, like, affordable to someone who fucking works at Burger King.
Because there's like technically there is a government title for apartments, or it's always going to be apartment buildings, generally speaking, but apartments that are affordable housing apartment complexes.
Right.
That means they're subsidized by the federal government for people to live there, and you have to have, if you make over X amount of dollars, you can't qualify for that, or you'll be on some kind of sliding scale.
Section 8 housing.
That's exactly what she's talking about. She's not talking about more houses that people can actually afford. She's talking about government-sponsored and subsidized housing projects like Section 8 housing.
Right.
The fucking...
Because even if you're not talking about, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but even if you're not talking about government-sponsored housing like that, if you look at when we talked about was like the payroll tax in Seattle, a big part of that was zoning and stuff for new buildings. X amount of those new buildings have to be affordable housing, which is subsidized by the federal government. It's not owned by the federal government. It's built and owned by a private person who is going to rent out all those apartments. But
and gets a steady check from the government.
They can only charge so much, and whatever they need to charge to offset the other costs is going to be offset by the federal government because they are letting those people who have X income live in those apartments.
Yes. It's very similar to rent controls within certain cities.
Yes.
You can only charge this much, and then if you need more as the building owner, you'll get subsidized by the state, the city,
and there's big talks of rent controls
in Seattle right now.
Yes, and
massive.
In multiple governments. That's in like multiple facets of the government. There are different big talks about rent controls going on.
And that is just a tighter and tighter grasp of the government's involvement in your everyday life. Just keep that in mind.
This effort collapsed as Washington bought wholesale into what we now know was an incorrect analysis by permanently wrong economists of the causes of inflation. In the face of massive supply chain disruptions and what is by now a widely accepted phenomenon of corporate price gouging, these economists pointed to the little bit of money in regular Americans' bank accounts as the sole driver of inflation. And
go ahead, Donovan.
Okay, so it wasn't the money that we had that caused the inflation. That isn't even the argument that is being made, right? Especially because, as she said before, most of that money went directly back into the economy. Even if it's just going to pay off your credit card debt, that goes back to a bank who's going to rent that money back out. Who's going to loan that money back out? No, it's the same thing, but to use the correct verbiage, who's going to loan that money back out? It's flowing back into the economy, whether you bought goods for your house. I've talked about it before. I paid off debt and bought ammunition. That's all the government checks I got. That's where all those dollars went to.
Investment.
Straight back into the economy, and it benefited me on the back end. So the argument was that money being printed does in fact affect inflation. You cannot add that much money to the supply and not make the dollars worth less money. That it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
That's not how any type of economic analysis works at all.
No.
There was in fact an aspect of corporate price gouging that went on, as there is always going to be.
Always?
People are always going to try and make more money when the opportunity is there.
Oh, for sure.
There are pieces of shit out there. There are people who just own companies who have fiduciary responsibility to their board of directors, to their investors. They have to try and make the most money. It doesn't always look good. Sometimes it's shitty. That's what their job is. And we can argue all day about whether or not that should be it, but that's the choices that they made.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a completely separate conversation.
Totally separate.
Which I'm generally down with.
Yes.
But
she's also started to spin this line about, the Fed has told us through their study that it was the corporate price gouging that added to the inflation and not any of the money that was added to it.
So it's not what they did that caused the problem. They're not going to admit that what they did caused the problem. They're going to point the finger at somebody else.
There were literally trillions of dollars added to the national debt over the last 5 years. Oh, yeah. It is impossible to argue that that does not cause inflation to a high degree. It's impossible. It's not a valid argument. Whatever anybody is saying to that, I'm not an economist. You don't have to be to understand when you add that much fake money to the fucking supply, it's worth less. You can't buy as much shit. That's how it works.
Yep. With every extra dollar that's printed, the value of your dollar that you're holding goes down. Your buying power goes down. Inflation goes up. It's literally economics 101 type of stuff.
And we've seen those effects around the globe with different countries choosing to not use our currency for trading in oil for different aspects. Or you can see it just in the comparison of our dollar to other dollars.
Oh, dude.
It's not worth as much anymore.
We're getting hammed up right now. It's getting rough out there as far as that goes.
We caught a bunch of troll shit in the comments this week about how we're fucking right-wing grifters and lying and all this type of shit, right? If you want to go through the hundreds of hours of times that we have made content and try and find a time in which we intentionally lied to you, I will give you money out of my own pocket.
Yes.
I know for a fact I've never come on this show and intentionally misled anybody.
Nope.
And I know that there have been multiple times where I've heard something that I said that's wrong and reflected on it, and we've done a fucking segment on it. We've eaten crow and made a whole fucking deal about it. Yep. So I'm not going to hear any of that shit from anybody about how we're grifting anything.
No, dude.
This woman is lying to the people who give her money.
Indeed.
Right? There is no debate about that. That's fine that this is the article that people are also saying this. Certainly that is an aspect.
Yeah.
The argument that that's the only thing that drove the inflation is absolute dog shit.
Yeah. And the fact that people did have money go into their pockets did also contribute to inflation because they printed that money, and that unfortunately, when they printed trillions and trillions of dollars, we got a fraction of a decimal of what they printed. The rest of it went to massive corporations to keep all, I would assume, their, every congressional member and senators, pet lobbyist happy.
Right.
You would assume. I mean, everything from car manufacturers to airlines to, various oil and gas industries.
Hotels, all the PPP loans, all the money they're trying to reclaim from that because they give out false PPP loans. I mean, it is endless the amount of people that got money. So even, I'm really glad you said that because I completely forgot about that aspect of the argument, that even not even this. Considering all that is such a small portion of what really fed to inflation because of what a minute aspect of that legislation that these $1,200, what I think it ended up being like $3,800 at the most, you know, that you got. It's a very, very minute portion of what fed to inflation.
Yeah. Like a fraction of a pittance, man.
Yes.
Nothing. But hey, these people care about you.
Basically, Biden and the Democrats bought it, running like scared children away from the part of their agenda that actually would have helped ordinary people in immediate, tangible ways. The collapse of Build Back Better roughly coincided with a messy Afghan withdrawal, which was 100% the right thing to do, but led to uniform condemnation of the Biden administration across media outlets. With this 1-2 punch, Biden's once impressive approval ratings collapsed and never recovered, as you can see on that chart. So
56% was the high point. And that was once impressive, huh?
Yeah.
56% approval. Way to go, dude.
that's the short-term economic reality, which has led Biden to be rated so poorly overall and specifically poorly on his stewardship of the economy. And it stands in stark contrast to a medium to long-term economic vision, which I have to say is actually the best of any president of my lifetime. Now, you might say that's a low bar. True. You might say there is way more that needs to be done. Also true. But the long-term Bidenomics vision represents an important and notable shift away from the market-obsessed tenets of 40 years of neoliberalism, which have decimated our industrial capacity along with our once-storied middle class. To put it simply, Biden and his team have rejected the Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Obama consensus on free trade and have returned to a direct industrial policy that harkens back to the New Deal era or even to the Hamiltonian system, which helped to build our nation in the first place.
I have questions about this because I don't know about you, but as far as a national industrial base and Biden's support and say advocacy for that, I feel like the only thing that you could possibly point to as actually being true about that would be like the CHIPS Act and funding towards microprocessor manufacturers around the country, which was a thing, and they are in there's ones being built. I think there's a couple of them. I think there's one in Oklahoma being built or something. They are doing that. But as far as everything else,
maybe infrastructure, maybe just that people here are going to get those jobs. But
yeah, but it's like the industrial base. I don't think he has had nothing, but he's tried to raise tax or remove the tax cuts for corporations, and so that, like, let me start over again. That was my brain is not working yet. When Trump was in office, he essentially threatened major companies to bring their workforces back to the United States. He wanted to bring manufacturing back to the United States, and was successful in that to a small point, but it was more like getting factories from overseas, like in Asia and stuff like that, to be down in Mexico, and then we'll import from Mexico, that kind of thing. That was good, like the Ford factories and all that stuff. They quit all their super overseas stuff to bring things back to Mexico. More stuff being built there. But I mean, Detroit didn't see like a vibrant resurgence for fucking, the GM factory out there. And I mean, it's still just as terrible as it has been for decades at this point.
She started to really champion this union thing, the Biden support for unions. And we talked about that the other day, that she seems to be forgetting how upset she was when they put the foot down on the railway union and the dealings that they were trying to have. They're like, get your shit together, accept this deal because we're moving on. She was very upset about that, and that supposedly apparently doesn't matter anymore. Not anymore.
But yeah, I'm begging to see picture what she's actually seeing, what she's saying. I don't see a resurgence in national manufacturing or in the generalized industrial base. He continues to go after natural gas and oil drilling here, which thank you very much. And then thanks to all the Build Back Better green things that they actually did get through at the time, our entire energy grid is on the precipice of being just totally fucked. Period. Full stop.
I got it.
What do we do?
Do you know what type of manufacturing Biden's investing in? Military manufacturing.
Oh,
that's where all the money's going.
It is. Hundreds of billions of dollars to Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and a number of other ones. Interesting. I mean, that
must be what she's talking about.
It has to be, because that is true. That is one sector of the industrial sector in America that is just going gangbusters, printing weapons out there and just sending them over to Ukraine.
Must be what she's talking about.
That's a good grab. I like that. How could I have missed that?
Yeah.
The Infrastructure Act is helping to build critical infrastructure, which was desperately needed, long neglected. The CHIPS Act prioritizes domestic industrial development of semiconductors, absolutely essential industry. The very poorly named Inflation Reduction Act is the most ambitious piece of Biden industrial policy, which seeks to get America wholeheartedly into the game of green tech investment, an industry which will define the future and an area where China has long been destroying us through their own large investments and industrial policy.
So she's talking about green energy.
Because we're going to start making solar panels and we're going to put up new electric charging stations.
Yeah, and wind turbines, and that's going to be, that's all part of that Inflation Reduction Act.
Well, I'll tell you what, they're forever jobs because they fucking break all the goddamn time.
And they don't work very well. I saw this story on Twitter the other day. I almost put it in the grab bag, but I didn't because it's real sad. In one of the offshore wind farms that they're building, right? They just pour these giant fucking columns down into the seabed.
Yeah.
A fucking whale ran into one the other day and fucking died.
Oh my God.
And it was just a column. They haven't even put the actual wind turbine on it yet. So, it's good for nature, though, supposedly.
Nice.
At the same time, the Biden administration has also broken with 40 years of consensus on corporate power and monopolies, bringing in a group of true renegades to restore trust busting and make it relevant again in the modern era. There is hardly an industry where a small group of giant corporations haven't taken over with devastating consequences for small businesses, workers, farmers, and consumers, to name a few groups. So this work is really essential. And while, of course, I want them to go further and vehemently oppose the Biden admin's intervention in the rail workers' potential strike.
Okay.
This is the first administration in my life that has taken significant steps to strengthen union power.
That's not a good thing. They already have a stranglehold in power in every major industry.
And the interlocking between union and politics is destructive to the country. It's not beneficial. During COVID, because it's a perfect example, some of the larger unions were some of the most ardent supporters of the very restrictions that were keeping our economy confined.
Yes.
One of them being the teachers union. That is one of the biggest unions in the country, if not the biggest, has enormous political power and was almost single-handedly keeping schools closed against what we all knew was the best for the children.
Yep.
And fought for it for 3 years.
And some of them are still doing it.
Because of the teachers. Because the teachers need to be safe.
Got to keep them teachers safe. Yeah, teachers unions. I mean, every major infrastructure construction project.
The airline unions.
Yes.
This was an issue.
This was an issue. The CEO, I don't know if I want to put him on blast, but it's public. CEO of Alaska Airlines doubled his salary. Did anybody else working there, did they get their salary doubled?
Right.
Nah, not even a little bit. But they don't really have control over that because, much like many other industries, it's controlled by unions.
Right.
And, unions have lots of problems because you can't just... Union leadership will create a contract with whoever owns this and runs the company, right?
A collective bargaining agreement.
Yes, and these contracts run for certain periods of time.
Yes.
And so you may not be able to readdress this thing for a number of years, depending on what the previous contract was. But again, we see this with all week this week, there are no traffic on the major ferry route going to Seattle from Bainbridge Island, right?
Yes.
And there are no vehicle traffic allowed on that ferry for a week.
Why?
Because they're doing work on the piers. Because they got it's part of infrastructure stuff. We've got a bunch of money for it. We've been rebuilding. They just redid the terminal over in Seattle. They're rebuilding part of the terminal. It's just like the entryway and stuff like that in the one in Bainbridge. But because of all the construction goes on, you can't have traffic being run back and forth. So it's shutting that shit down for a week. Every one of those construction companies that are working on that, union or private sector, having to go through the rigmarole of having to pay everybody union wages just to have the opportunity to work there.
Right.
Which a small company can get seriously fucked on because the government takes a while to pay people. You have to essentially invest a bunch of money up front to pay all your employees these things, hoping that on the back end, you're actually going to get paid in a timely manner from the government so that you don't fucking lose your business. But every one of these major infrastructure programs, a lot of them be done by utility companies, unionized. It's all, yeah, that's how they strengthen union, by giving them more and more jobs, by having all this massive funding come in so that they can pay for these jobs.
Right.
Meantime, mom and pop shops, small businesses are getting screwed out of those opportunities.
Right.
Strengthening unions is not always a good thing. It's generally a bad thing. Because, I mean, I've harped on unions so much. You as an individual worker, if you're so concerned about workers and the worker, you have zero control over, you have zero bargaining power when you're in a union. You just join the union, and the union does your bargaining power for you. You just have to accept what it is that they give you and hope that you get a good deal.
She's been arguing a lot lately for different, as funding goes out from the government, like demanding that that funding goes to companies, or companies that are requiring the union jobs, right? Union employment. These go, that's what these different contracts and stuff go out to. As someone who works for a small business who's not union, the issue I have with that is it puts other people who work for small business at a disadvantage, that they aren't up for those contracts. If they can't afford to pay union wages, something like that, then they aren't even available for that. And it grows that corner of the market that the unions have, that pushes the small businesses out if they don't want to unionize, if it doesn't benefit them. If, you know, we've talked about it in our own business, if we unionized as an employee base, it would not benefit us to be in a union. We would be in a worse off position in almost all aspects. We wouldn't have as good of an environment. They couldn't work with us as interpersonally as they do. A lot of the personal stuff they do for us couldn't happen anymore if we had free unions. We would not be in a better place as employees if Bennick was unionized.
No, and I worked at a manufacturing plant before working at Bennick the first time that was majority unionized.
Yeah.
Most of the workers there were parts of unions. I was like a really rare exception that got a single hire. And I had the opportunity to join the union, but I declined.
Because I think we're in a right to work state where you're not required to join unions if like a shop is unionized. You can still work there. You're not required to join a union. There are some places that are not right to work states where if it's a union, you have to join it. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
But here, I believe that we do.
Yeah, and I mean even most I almost went into heating and cooling at one time, and the reason that I ended up declining that because as part of that job, I had to join that specific union. Like it was some Teamsters union or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not into that concept because then my wages are fixed according to whatever contracts are getting done. And that's not the way I operate. I don't just give away my labor to be compensated by a collective group later on that decides what I get ultimately in the end. I'm not into that. I like to be able to sell my own self-worth at whatever price that I negotiate with my employer. And
in a truly capitalist economy, that will benefit you. If you are proving that you can provide more value to a company than other employees, then you should be compensated more. You should not be restricted by a collective bargaining agreement, even though we fully support the right of individuals to come together to represent themselves if that's what they feel is the best thing to do. You shouldn't be put at a disadvantage of that because of this set agreement that's already there before you got there, or if you didn't agree with it, if you voted against it. These are not things that you should be limited by in a capitalist economy.
Yeah, and that's also another thing too that you just brought up, like the democratic side of things like that. They're voting. Yeah, you as a union member vote for what you want your union to do or not. Right. In which case, again, you're giving up the rights to your own labor to, the tyrannical 51% in this democratic vote that's happening in your union. You still don't even have that much choice in it. Yeah. You get one vote. Congratulations, whether or not it works out for you. It's up to the democratic process. Yeah. Good luck, Godspeed.
I don't want 1/500th say in my employment status, in like in my situation. I'm not interested in that.
No. And the other thing about it is that with those extra benefits and higher salaries, they siphon a lot of people out of the private industry, which makes companies only still be able to pay so much. Right. Because essentially subsidized workplaces like unions can pay you twice as much sometimes. And if you're in a fucking bind, at the end of the day, you might have to go work for a union to go make more money, and then next thing you know, that just bolsters their power even more.
Yeah.
Just through the fucking stranglehold they keep on the entire labor force. It's not good, dude. It's a very, very nuanced thing.
Yeah.
Unions, you have to. It's a very nuanced problem because there's pluses, there's minuses, but just a blatant strengthening of unions, in her words, is not necessarily a good thing.
Right.
Overall, it's probably a bad thing, especially for the worker, quote unquote.
Biden National Labor Relations Board has been a game changer for workers trying to organize. From decisions in favor of Starbucks workers to the recent earthquake ruling that will force union busters to immediately recognize and bargain with workers, real steps have been taken that could lead to a resurgence of labor, which to me is the single most important thing you could do to improve the lot of American workers. To underscore just how important this really is, just take a look at this chart. Killing unions killed the middle class. It is really that simple. Now,
what's the years down there? 1967
to 2012.
Look at that. Has there been any other governmental involvement and, detrimental policies passed since then that would have greatly decreased the power of the middle class?
Stop asking questions.
Now, as I've said before,
here.
Biden NLRB alone is reason to choose Biden over Trump if your priority is the fate of the American working class. But none of that positive possible future for Bidenomics
there
is
definitely
helping
wasn't
people.
any type of trade deals or anything that sent a shitload of jobs overseas. Nothing like that happened in between 67 and 2012. There weren't any type of NAFTA agreements. None of that type of shit.
None
happened.
of that stuff.
Nothing.
Nothing at all. That just completely gutted the middle class.
Yeah, no corporate buyouts, no nothing.
And what was the first thing Trump did when he got in the office? Just
You shut your mouth.
nuke the TPP?
You shut your mouth.
I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking
Shut your
questions.
damn mouth. Biden's the best.
People today, right now, nor will it be helping them when they go to cast their ballots a year from now. The Biden team screwed themselves by abandoning an immediate agenda of material progress for debt-laden Americans. That's the real problem for him. After all, Biden's been old this whole time. He was old when he won the Democratic primary. He was old when he beat Trump. He was old at the beginning of his term when his approval rating was soaring. And he's still faring better.
There's no doubt there's been a marked decline in Joe Biden's mental state
It's
since
not
he had
age,
been
dude.
president.
It's not age.
We have to give him credit when he was on the debate stage. Or like, he's actually kind of with it. Like,
Yeah.
he's actually coherent in this discussion where Donald Trump is fucking giving him the rope-a-dope. But he's here. Like, he's still here. He's choosing to ignore him, but he is here. He is not even in the fucking building anymore.
No, dude. He's not even in the building. I really want to know what cocktail of drugs they shot him up with before that debate. Because we need to fucking patent that shit, put it into a pill, and start just sending it.
I want some of that before every show.
Yes, that's exactly.
We'll be
We'll put
millionaires
Alpha Brain out
tomorrow.
of business, dude. Let's
Yeah.
go. I just want all the amphetamines. That's basically
Biden
what
brain.
they
That's
are.
what it's called. Biden brain.
Do you want to win a debate against Donald Trump? Biden brain.
in the polls than his much younger vice president, Kamala Harris. What has changed isn't Biden being old. It's the credit card balances, the dwindling bank accounts, and increasingly hopeless housing situation that has turned what should be a gimme reelect into grave peril. And Sagar, that's sort of my over.
So,
And isn't it interesting that those... Go ahead.
her overall point, because this whole thing is essentially Biden's too old, this is why he's losing, right? And then she goes, no, it has to do with the economy, and Biden's long-term plans are great, but his short-term plans have been terrible. Look around you for a second and ask yourself, are you markedly worse off today than you were fucking 4 years ago?
Yes.
In every objective metric, 100%. There's a very, very small group of people in this country, the fucking super wealthy, that are better off today than they were back then because they got all that fucking money. The regular ass person, the middle class that she is so apt to protect, is exponentially worse off today than they were 4 years ago, and it's not even by a little bit. I mean, it is so much.
And they don't care about what he's saying about 10 years from now or what she's saying about 10 years from now, 20 years from now. That doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter at all, dude.
Those things don't matter to me right now.
No, you fucked up. You've made life worse for every American since you got into office, and you're continually making it worse every single day.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with his age. His age is not the problem. His dementia is the problem.
Right.
That is part of that problem, because when he gets up there and he's wandering around like fucking Mr. Magoo and falling down and just blurting out incoherent sentences and just stopping sometimes midway and giving up on whatever he was trying to say.
The human Roomba was good.
Whatever.
That was a good comparison.
The what?
Shane Gillis called him a human Roomba.
Yes.
And like, that's very
That
good.
was perfect,
That's very, very good, you know.
Yeah, that certainly has an effect on his approval rating.
Yes.
Because when the fucking corporate press is blasting him out there at every available minute to try to make him look good, and people see that decrepit dude putzing around on stage, they go, I don't like that.
Well, his
That's
team,
rough,
his
dude.
team is bad too. You know,
Terrible.
Corinne Jean-Pierre, like who's his mouthpiece, she's bad.
She's been getting hemmed up lately.
She's
dude.
really bad.
I think I have a clip when we do Maui later that illustrates some serious issues. She's like giving up.
Yeah,
it's tough, dude.
They should have held Saki. They should have held Saki forever.
Just I don't know if they could have offered her the money. You know, MSNBC offered her a fat ass contract. So she's
bet.
like, I gotta go. I got my
go.
own show now. I got that clout and those dollars.
I can't believe that she has her own show.
It's fucking rough, dude.
She is the worst.
100%. But also, shout out to her, because she's grabbing her bag, dude. She got hers.
Capitalized for sure.
She got it, dude.
Yeah.
And that's phenomenal.
To the south of the streets